Well, Joachim Bitterlich is a professor and former NATO diplomat joining me now live. Jens Stoltenberg has said Ukraine is using more ammunition than is being provided. Just to give some numbers, Ukraine's firing up to 6,000 to 7,000 artillery shells each day, just a third of the amount that Russia is using. Will NATO countries be able to provide the ammunition Ukraine needs?
I hope so. I hope so, at least, because they need ammunition and they use ammunition, let's say, in quantities perhaps comparable to what the Americans have been doing in the war in Iraq years ago. And therefore, they need really more artillery, they need more missiles, they need more ammunition, and this in a fast track. And they are expecting tanks. That's the other side, in order to counter any offensive of the Russian side.
Now, you mentioned these tanks, and there already has been a pledge for tanks from some allies. What about the request from President Zelensky for more fighter planes? He just again was in London, Brussels, Paris, asking for more of these planes. So far, the U.S. has said no. Do you think those fighter jets will get to Ukraine?
First, one word about the tanks. It seems to be difficult to get, let's say, even a battalion of Leopard 2 tanks from the West European countries. The Germans have promised, their training is underway, and now they have found at least the Norwegians and the Portuguese. I hope there will come many more. But fighter jets is another quality and another situation, because even in defense ministries, people are asking themselves from where these fighter planes could start and land. Is it in the Ukraine or not? Second, if they want to have Western planes like the F-16 or Mirage 2000 or others, you have to train the pilots for months. And on the other side, they could get MiG-29, former Soviet planes or Russian planes modernized in the last 20 years, from their neighbors in Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, or even in Hungary. What's easier for them? And on the other hand, people who are observing the ground tell me it's interesting to see that you don't see many airplanes or fighter jets, and you don't see many fighting helicopters.
We've been hearing more about Russian plans to up its offensive around the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. There's been talk of an increased offensive coming from Russia in the coming weeks elsewhere in Ukraine. At this point, how can NATO better help Ukraine prepare for that offensive?
First of all, by better coordination of delivery of the different arms to the Ukraine. Not so many different arms for the same purpose. Clearly more arms of the same purpose, same quality, and even more ammunition, and speed up certain deliveries of armed vehicles and of artillery. Extremely important.
Another question for you, Joachim. On Monday, the president of Moldova accused Russia of planning to use foreign saboteurs to basically bring down the tiny country, stopping it from joining the EU, using it in the war against Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the same story we have heard before some weeks ago from Ukraine, that the Russians had similar plans to overtake the Ukraine in this way. And I understand totally the president of Moldova to be extremely preoccupied by such a situation. And I hope very much that, let's say, at least the neighbors who know more Moldova than we know in Western Europe, especially the Romanians and others, will help Moldova, let's say, to counter any offensive of this way.
Just to wrap up, another big topic for NATO recently has been the candidacies of Sweden and Finland. Do you think anything will come out of the meeting today about that, or will this all be focused on Ukraine?
I hope so. I hope so, at least, because, let's say, Finland and Sweden delivered their demand of entry May 22. It's now far away. And it's still going on with a certain blackmail from the Turkish side. And I hope very much that this question will be resolved before the NATO summit, And this ministerial meeting is one of the last opportunities before the summit to clear up this question. I know that the Swedish have shown a certain awkward gesture of this ratification process. It's clear, not the Finns, but I think Turkey should stop this blackmail and agree, because both nations, Sweden and Finland, have been showing, let's say, with regard to the earthquake, with regard to the situation in Turkey, great understanding.
Joachim, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Joachim Bitterlich, professor and former NATO diplomat. Thank you.
Pleasure.